I hired a woman to clean the house while my wife was at a design expo. An hour later, she called, whispering, "Mr. Thompson, is anyone else in this house?" My coffee mug nearly slipped from my grip. "Why would you ask that?" I said, already dreading the answer. "Something doesn't feel right here," she said, her voice trembling. What I discovered hidden above our bedroom would shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Before we continue, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Life has this way of blindsiding you when you're least prepared. That Tuesday morning in Atlanta felt like a blessing, a rare day off. My job selling medical equipment keeps me traveling state to state, and with no kids, Vanessa and I have mastered the art of ships passing in the night. She was heading to a 3-day graphic design expo, and I figured I'd finally tackle the housework. I was lining up cleaning supplies when my phone buzzed. DeAndre Wallace. "Marcus, man," he boomed. "Tell me you're not stuck working on a beautiful morning like this." I laughed, staring at the spray bottles and dust rags. "Actually, I'm about to become best friends with every surface in this Victorian." "Absolutely not. Coffee. Now, Ponce de Leon, my treat." And just like that, he hung up. Classic DeAndre never takes no for an answer. I stood there, torn between chores and the rare chance to catch up with an old friend. Then I remembered the West End neighborhood Facebook group. I scrolled through and found a post from yesterday. Kenya Harris, reliable house cleaning services, part-time availability, excellent references. Perfect timing. I could help someone who needed extra work and still enjoy coffee with DeAndre. I messaged Kenya, and within minutes she responded enthusiastically. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from DeAndre, watching morning sunlight stream through the cafe windows. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely relaxed. "So how's Vanessa's design career going?" DeAndre asked. "Incredible. Her cookbook cover series is blowing up beyond anything we imagined." We were deep into conversation when my phone rang. Kenya Harris. I figured she was calling to say she'd finished. "Mr. Thompson." Her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with terror. "Yes, Kenya." "Everything okay? Is anyone else in the house?" My blood turned cold. "No. Why do you ask?" "I'm having coffee with a friend." "I heard crying sounds," she whispered, breathing heavily. "It's coming from somewhere upstairs." "I'm scared, Mr. Thompson. I'm leaving right now." The line went dead. DeAndre was staring at me, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. "Marcus, what's wrong?" I was already standing, throwing money on the table. The peaceful morning had shattered like glass dot as I rushed toward my car. One thought kept echoing. There shouldn't be anyone in that house. No one at all. The drive home felt endless, my mind racing through possibilities. A break-in? But Kenya would have seen signs of forced entry. Something else? The closer I got to our quiet West End street, the more my unease grew. When I pulled into our driveway, everything looked normal. The house sat there like it always did, with its characteristic Victorian lines and wraparound porch. But something felt different. The windows seemed too dark, the yard too still. I sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at our front door. Kenya's terrified voice echoed in my head, crying sounds from upstairs in an empty house. The silence that greeted me felt too complete. Too careful. My hands shook as I dialed 911 from our front porch. "Atlanta Police Department, what's your emergency?" "I think someone might be in my house." My cleaning lady heard crying sounds and fled. Within 15 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. Officer Martinez, a seasoned veteran, took charge while his younger partner, Officer Williams, prepared to sweep the house. "Mr. Thompson, please wait outside while we clear the premises." I watched from the sidewalk as they methodically worked through our home living room. kitchen, dining room, Vanessa's studio. They checked closets, behind furniture, under beds. The process took nearly an hour. Kenya arrived as they finished the main floor, still pale from earlier. I was dusting when I heard it, she told Officer Williams nervously. Definitely crying. A woman's voice from somewhere above me. It wasn't TV or radio, I checked. It was real. Officer Martinez emerged from upstairs. We've cleared the second floor. Now let's check attic access. In our hallway ceiling was a small square hatch with a rusty padlock hanging from the latch. This lead to your attic? Martinez asked. Yeah, but we never use it. Just old storage, Christmas decorations, boxes. Williams examined the lock. This thing's ancient. Rust pattern suggests it hasn't been opened in years. Access is pretty small, too. You'd need a ladder. Probably not worth checking. Martinez agreed. If someone was hiding up there, they'd need a way down without that ladder. But something caught my eye. The dust around the hatch looked disturbed, and the padlock had cleaner spots where fingers might have gripped it. Officers, are you sure about that lock? It looks like... Mr. Thompson, Martinez interrupted gently. We've been thorough. No forced entry anywhere. Most likely explanation. Old houses settle. Pipes expand and contract. Could sound like crying if you're not familiar with the acoustics. After they left, I stood in our empty house feeling unsettled. The official explanation made sense, but Kenya's terror had been genuine. My phone buzzed around 7. Vanessa. Honey, I'm cutting the expo short. Something didn't feel right after you called. I'm driving back tonight. She arrived 2 hours later, slightly frayed around the edges. I walked her through everything: Kenya's call, the police search, their conclusions. That poor girl was probably just spooked, Vanessa said, rubbing my shoulders as we sat on our couch. You know how these old houses can play tricks. Remember when we first moved in? I swore. I heard footsteps for weeks. Her explanation was reasonable, her touch comforting. But lying in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unresolved. The way that padlock had looked, the certainty in Kenya's voice, the timing of Vanessa's early return, something still felt unfinished. The morning light did nothing to ease the restlessness that had kept me tossing all night. Vanessa was already up, moving around the room with unusual urgency. I have to get to the studio early today, she announced, not quite meeting my eyes. Important client meeting. They're pushing hard for the next cookbook cover deadline. I propped myself up on one elbow. You sure you're okay? You seemed pretty shaken up last night. Just tired from the drive back. You know how I get when my routine gets disrupted. After she left, I made the call I'd been dreading. My boss wasn't thrilled when I asked to postpone my 3-day client visit to Birmingham. Marcus, the hospital account is crucial right now. What's so important? Something's happening at home that I need to figure out, I said. Staring at the ceiling hatch in our hallway, the house felt different when I was alone. Around noon, while making a sandwich, I heard a soft thump from somewhere above. Like someone shifting their weight on old floorboards. I froze, listening. There it was again. Definitely not pipe settling. This sounded deliberate, careful. When Vanessa came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room. Honey, I heard sounds from upstairs today. Similar to what Kenya described. She set down her briefcase and gave me that patient smile. Just mice, sweetheart. Old houses like ours are full of them. They get into the walls, the attic space. But this sounded heavier than mice. Did you call an exterminator? She interrupted smoothly. I can get recommendations from the neighbors. Mrs. Patterson dealt with the same thing last year. I followed her to the kitchen. Vanessa, Kenya was absolutely certain she heard crying. Human crying. She pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. That poor girl was probably just tired, Marcus. You know how some people dramatize things for attention? She's young, probably watches too many horror movies. She seemed genuinely terrified. What would you like for dinner? She asked brightly. I picked up some of that salmon you love. This pattern continued through the evening. Every concern I raised was met with a logical explanation. Every question redirected to something mundane. When I mentioned the disturbed dust around the attic hatch, she suggested we needed better cleaning supplies, Dot. By the time we went to bed, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Her explanations were reasonable, her tone loving and concerned. But something nagged at me as I lay there in the dark. Every answer had felt rehearsed, as if she'd been preparing for these exact questions long before I'd asked them. The next morning brought number relief from my growing unease. Vanessa left for another crucial client meeting, her kiss goodbye feeling perfunctory, almost distracted. Once her car disappeared down our West End street, I found myself drawn to her home studio. I'd always respected Vanessa's creative space, the converted sunroom where she worked on her cookbook cover designs and branding concepts. But today, suspicion overrode courtesy. If she was hiding something, maybe the answers were in plain sight. The room smelled of markers and fixative, with afternoon light filtering through tall windows onto her drafting table. Portfolio cases lined the shelves, filled with what I assumed were her current projects. I opened the nearest one, expecting to find her usual cover designs. Instead, I found sketches that made my breath catch. The drawing style was unmistakable delicate linework with bold, confident digital strokes that captured not just form, but emotion. I'd seen this exact technique countless times growing up. These weren't Vanessa's drawings. They were Shanice's. My sister Shanice had been the artist in our family, the one with real talent that left art teachers speechless. Even as kids, she could draw people in ways that revealed their souls. Her digital illustrations had a distinctive quality, part technical precision, part raw emotional honesty that you couldn't teach or fake. And here it was. In my wife's portfolio, Shanice had vanished 10 years ago, just when her freelance illustration career was taking off. She'd been working on a major project for Essence magazine, had finally gotten the recognition her talent deserved. Then one day, she simply disappeared. Her apartment was neat, no signs of struggle. But she was gone. The police investigation went nowhere. They assumed she'd gotten overwhelmed and run away to start fresh somewhere else. I'd always blamed myself for not pushing harder, not hiring private investigators, not refusing to accept their theory. But Shanice had always been independent, sometimes impulsive. The explanation seemed plausible, even if it broke our family's heart. Now, staring at these sketches, a terrible timeline was forming in my mind. Shanice disappeared 10 years ago. Vanessa's career exploded 9 years ago with Southern Comfort Reimagined, a cookbook cover series that launched her into the publishing stratosphere. The illustrations in those books had been praised for their fresh perspective and emotional depth. Pulled out more portfolios, my hands shaking. Page after page of preliminary sketches, concept art, character studies, all in Shanice's unmistakable style. The flowing lines, the way she captured light and shadow, the distinctive way she drew hands and facial expressions. This was impossible. Vanessa had never shown this level of artistic skill before her sudden success. Her early attempts at illustration had been competent but unremarkable. Then, seemingly overnight, her work had transformed into something extraordinary, something that looked exactly like my missing sister's art. I sank into Vanessa's chair, portfolio pages scattered across the desk. The room felt like it was spinning. Where had these drawings come from? And why had she never mentioned finding them or having them? The implications were too horrible to fully process. But one thought kept echoing through my mind as I stared at those achingly familiar sketches. How could Vanessa have Shaughnessy's artwork when no one had seen or heard from my sister in 10 years? I needed air. The discovery in Vanessa's studio had left me reeling. I stepped onto our front porch when Mrs. Patterson appeared at her mailbox across the street. Eleanor Patterson, our retired schoolteacher neighbor, waved me over with a warm smile. "Marcus, dear, how are you after all that police excitement yesterday?" I crossed the street, grateful for normal conversation. False alarm, thankfully. Our cleaning lady thought she heard something. Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully, then paused. "You know, Marcus, there is one thing I've been meaning to mention. It might be nothing, but what is it? Your attic light has been on every single night recently. Every night, like clockwork." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I'm sorry. What?" "The light up there." She pointed toward our attic window. "It goes on around 8 o'clock every evening and stays on until nearly midnight. I've noticed it consistently for the past 3 or 4 years now." My mouth went dry. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Oh, yes, dear. I'm quite the night owl. I sit by my bedroom window with evening tea and my word puzzles. Your attic window is right in my line of sight." She studied my expression. "You didn't know?" I shook my head, unable to form words. "I just assumed Vanessa had set up some art studio up there. I actually asked her about it once at the grocery store, complimented her dedication to working so late into the night." "What did she say?" Mrs. Patterson's brow furrowed. "That's the odd thing. She just smiled and said something about inspiration striking at all hours, then quickly changed the subject. It felt like she didn't want to discuss it." My heart pounded. "When you say every night, every single night for years now, Marcus. Rain or shine, weekends, holidays. Someone is definitely up there." The pieces were forming a terrible picture. Shaughnessy's artwork in Vanessa's portfolio. My wife's sudden artistic success. Years of mysterious attic activity that coincided perfectly with my travel schedule. As I thanked Mrs. Patterson and headed back inside, I remembered Vanessa's text from earlier. The expo had been extended through tomorrow. She wouldn't be home tonight. For the first time in years, I would be alone in the house during those mysterious evening hours Mrs. Patterson had described. Tonight, I was going to find out what was behind that rusted padlock. At 11:30 p.m. The house felt different without Vanessa's presence. The familiar creaks and settling sounds seemed amplified in the darkness. I'd been pacing the living room for hours, building up courage for what I was about to do. Retrieved the stepladder from the garage and positioned it beneath the attic hatch as quietly as possible. My hands trembled as I climbed up, flashlight gripped between my teeth, a pair of heavy-duty pliers in my back pocket. The padlock looked ancient in the beam of my flashlight. But when I tested it, something felt wrong. The metal moved too smoothly, the mechanism too well oiled, for something that supposedly hadn't been touched in. Years. It took only 2 firm twists. With the pliers before the lock snapped apart. With a soft click, I lifted the hatch cover slowly, and immediately a wave of air hit me that made my stomach lurch. This wasn't the dusty, stale smell of forgotten storage. This was the unmistakable scent of human habitation body odor. Cooking smells, the sharp tang of art supplies. And something else I didn't want to identify. Someone was living up here. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled myself through the opening. The space above was larger than I'd expected. The sloped ceiling just high enough for me to crouch. But what I saw in the sweep of my flashlight beam defied every assumption I'd had about our house. The attic had been converted into a makeshift living space. Art supplies were organized on crude shelves made from boards and cinder blocks. Digital tablets and charging tables snaked across the floor. A thin mattress occupied one corner, covered by a threadbare blanket. Food containers were stacked neatly beside a small camping stove. Books, dozens of them, were arranged along the floor and hunched over a drawing table in the far corner. Illuminated by a small battery-powered lamp was a figure that made my world stop spinning. "Who's there?" The voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and fragile. But it hit me like a physical blow. My legs buckled, and I had to grab the nearest roof beam to keep from collapsing. She turned slowly, and in the dim glow of her lamp, I saw a face that had haunted my dreams for 10 years. Gaunt beyond recognition, her hair long and unkempt, her clothes hanging loose on a frame that had once been healthy and strong. But the eyes, those were unmistakably hers. Shanice. The word came out as nothing more than a breath. I couldn't make my voice work, couldn't make my lungs function properly. She stared at me with an expression of disbelief so profound it mirrored my own shock. "Marcus?" She stood on unsteady legs, one skeletal hand reaching toward me. "Is it really you? Are you real?" The flashlight slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. Oh my God. Oh my God. Shanice. I crossed the cramped space in 2 stumbling steps and dropped to my knees, pulling her fragile form into my arms. She felt like she might break all sharp angles and hollow spaces. Where there should have been muscle and flesh we both dissolved into tears. 10 years of grief and loss and impossible hope pouring out in that terrible hidden space above my own home. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered against my shoulder. "I thought you'd forgotten about me." "Never," I sobbed. "Never, never, never." As we held each other in that dim attic prison, one devastating truth kept cycling through my shattered mind. 10 years. She'd been here, directly above my head, for 10 unbearable years. When our tears finally subsided, I pulled back to really look at my sister. The lamplight revealed the full extent of what captivity had done to her. Her cheekbones jutted sharply beneath paper-thin skin. Her wrists were no thicker than my thumbs. Her clothes hung like drapes on a scarecrow frame, but her eyes, those were still unmistakably Shanice. Still holding that spark of intelligence, I remembered. "Marcus, I never thought I'd see you again," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I thought you'd moved on, forgotten about me." "How could you think that?" "We searched everywhere. The police, private investigators. We never stopped looking." She gestured weakly at the makeshift living space around us. Artwork covered every available surface: sketches, digital prints, detailed illustrations that I now recognized as the foundation of Vanessa's career. This became my world, my prison and my purpose. "Shanice, what happened to you? Where have you been all these years?" She looked down at her hands, fingers permanently stained with ink and digital stylus marks. 10 years ago, I was working late at my studio downtown. Terrell Jackson, he was a client, wanted some custom illustrations for his restaurant chain. He seemed nice enough, professional. My blood chilled at the pain in her voice. He came by that night to review the sketches. But when he arrived, he'd been drinking. He started saying things, touching me. Her voice dropped to barely audible. He tried to. I reached for her hand, feeling how fragile her bones had become. I fought back, Marcus. I grabbed a heavy glass paperweight and hit him as hard as I could. "Oh, Shanice." He fell backward, hit his head on the corner of my drafting table. There was so much blood. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. I thought I'd killed him. That's when Vanessa found me. She'd come by to invite me to dinner at your place. Remember how she used to do that? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. When she saw what happened, she took charge immediately. What did she say? That I'd go to prison for murder. That even if it was self-defense, my life would be ruined. She said it would destroy you and our family to see me go through a trial, to have the scandal follow us forever. Shanice's eyes filled with fresh tears. She helped me hide his body, then brought me here to keep me safe until things died down. I stared at her in horror. But that was 10 years ago, Shanice. Why didn't you ever come forward? She convinced me it was too dangerous. And I felt so guilty, Marcus. I'd taken a life, even if it was to protect myself. So I stayed hidden, and I tried to make myself useful. I created artwork for Vanessa's career. It felt like penance, like my way of contributing while I remained in hiding. Something nagged at the back of my mind. Terrell Jackson, I said slowly. Shanice, that name sounds familiar. Her face went white. What do you mean? I saw Terrell Jackson last month. He's managing that new soul food restaurant chain on Auburn Avenue. I even shook his hand when Deandra and I had lunch there. He's very much alive, Shanice. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Shanice stared at me with an expression of absolute disbelief. That's impossible, she whispered. I killed him. I saw him die. Then someone made you think that. Someone wanted you to believe you'd killed him. The horrifying truth was crystallizing in my mind. Shanice, if Terrell is alive and well, running a successful business, then everything you've been told for 10 years is a lie. She began to shake, her frail body trembling as the implications hit her. But why would Vanessa? We need to call the police right now, I interrupted, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. This isn't just about a missing person anymore. This is kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud. God knows what else. My voice was barely steady as I dialed 911 from that cramped attic space. 911, what's your emergency? This is Marcus Thompson on West End Avenue. I found my sister who's been missing for 10 years. She's been held captive in my own house. Within 20 minutes, our house was swarming with police officers, paramedics, and detectives. Detective Sarah Morrison took charge of the scene, her experienced eyes taking in the converted attic space. Ma'am, I need you to tell me everything, she said gently to Shanice as paramedics checked her condition. Shanice repeated her story, the supposed attack, Terrell's apparent death, Vanessa's rescue and manipulation. Detective Morrison's expression grew grimmer with each. Detail, we need to locate Terrell Jackson immediately, she told her. Partner, the police found Terrell within hours. In the interrogation room, he initially denied everything. But when confronted with the evidence and told about Shanice's decade of captivity, his facade crumbled. Vanessa paid me $10,000 10 years ago, he finally confessed, tears streaming down his face. She said she wanted to teach her sister-in-law a lesson, scare her into staying away from Marcus. What exactly did she ask you to do? Stage an attack. Make it look real. I was supposed to grab Shanice. She'd fight back, hit me with something. Then I'd pretend to be knocked unconscious, play dead. Vanessa had fake blood capsules, the whole setup. And after that, I was supposed to disappear for a few weeks, let things cool down. Vanessa said it would just be a scare, that Shanice would be too frightened to bother your family again. His voice broke. I never knew she was going to tell her I was dead. I never knew she'd keep her prisoner all these years. As I listened to Terrell's confession, the full scope of Vanessa's manipulation became clear. She'd orchestrated an elaborate deception to eliminate what she saw as competition for my attention, then exploited Shanice's guilt and terror to steal her artistic talent. Now they had to arrest the real architect of this nightmare. Detective Morrison coordinated the operation with military precision. We'll wait for her to return. From the expo, she explained as officers positioned themselves around our house. We want her to see exactly what she's lost. Her victim free, her lies exposed. I sat in our living room with Shanice, who was wrapped in a blanket, and 4 drip in her arm from the paramedics. She looked so small on our couch, like a ghost finally made flesh. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 10 years of hiding, she was sitting in plain sight in the very house where she'd been imprisoned. "Are you ready for this?" I asked her quietly. She nodded, though her hands trembled. I need to see her face when she realizes it's over. We didn't have to wait long. Around 6:30 p.m. exactly, when Vanessa typically returned from work trips, we heard a car in the driveway. Detective Morrison signaled to her team. Through the window, I watched Vanessa's Honda Accord pull up and stop abruptly when she saw the patrol cars. For a moment, she just sat there, engine running. Then she threw the car in reverse. "Block her," Morrison radioed. 2 officers moved their vehicles to trap her in the driveway. Vanessa's car lurched to a stop, and she stumbled out, her usually composed demeanor completely shattered. "Where's Marcus?" She called out frantically as officers approached. "What's happened? Is there an emergency?" Detective Morrison stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Detective Morrison with Atlanta PD. We need you to come inside." "I don't understand. What's this about?" They escorted her through our front door, and the moment she saw Shanis sitting in our living room, the world stopped. Vanessa's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, then absolute terror. "No," she whispered. Then louder, "No, she's supposed to be upstairs. This can't be happening." She tried to back toward the door, but officers blocked her path. "She's mentally ill," Vanessa screamed, pointing at Shanis with a shaking finger. "She's dangerous. I was protecting everyone. She killed someone." "Mrs. Thompson, you need to calm down," Detective Morrison said firmly. But Vanessa was spiraling completely out of control. I made her useful. I gave her purpose, she shrieked. She was wasting her talent, hiding away like a coward. I made her famous. I made her matter. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. You don't understand?" Vanessa collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically. "I saved her. I gave her a life. Without me, she would have rotted in some jail cell." Detective Morrison nodded to her partner, who began recording on his phone. "Mrs. Thompson, are you confessing to holding Shanis Thompson against her will for 10 years? She belonged up there. She was safe. She was productive." Vanessa's voice cracked completely. "I built something beautiful from her talent. I made something that mattered." That's when Detective Morrison played Terrell's recorded confession on her phone. Vanessa's face crumpled as she heard every detail of the staged attack. The fake blood, the $10,000 payment. The fight went out of her completely. She slumped forward, handcuffs clicking into place around her wrists. As they led her away, I stared at this woman I thought I'd known. This stranger who had shared my bed and my life while torturing my sister just feet above my head. The woman I had married had never existed at all. 6 months later, I barely recognized the woman sitting across from me at the downtown Atlanta cafe. Shanis had gained 25 pounds of healthy weight. Her hair was professionally styled in gorgeous locks, and most importantly, there was light in her eyes again. I thought I'd never see return. "The therapist says I'm making remarkable progress," she told me, stirring honey into her tea. "Dr. Williams thinks I'm ready to start the speaking engagements next month." It had been a long road to recovery. The first few weeks after Vanessa's arrest were the hardest. Shanis suffered panic attacks, nightmares, and periods where she couldn't bear to be in enclosed spaces. But with intensive therapy, proper nutrition, and the unwavering support of family, she was slowly reclaiming her life. The breakthrough came when she decided to tell her story. Through art. The Girl in the Attic, a survivor's journey was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Page after page of haunting digital illustrations, chronicled her decade of captivity self-portraits, showing her gradual physical deterioration, detailed drawings of the cramped attic space, and most powerfully, images of her dreams of freedom. Birds flying through open windows, sunlight streaming through trees, women embracing in open fields. The publisher, Beacon Press, had been eager to work with her once word spread about her story. They understood they weren't just publishing a book, they were giving voice to a survivor, amplifying a black woman's truth that had been silenced for too long. The memoir became an instant bestseller. But more than that, it became a phenomenon. Shanice's story resonated with abuse survivors across the country, particularly black women who saw themselves in her struggle. Her illustrations, raw and honest, showed that art could be both a survival tool and a path to healing. "I get messages every day," she told me, pulling out her phone to show me emails from women who'd been trapped in abusive relationships, from people who thought they'd never escape their circumstances. They tell me my story gave them permission to speak up, to fight back, to survive. She'd started speaking at conferences about psychological manipulation and domestic abuse. Next month, she was launching art therapy workshops for trauma survivors at the local community center, teaching other women to use creativity as a healing tool. "I keep thinking about what you said that night," I admitted, watching her sign books for a small group of fans who recognized her. "About how I should have looked harder when you disappeared." She looked up from her signing, her expression gentle but firm. "Marcus, you found me when it mattered most. You saved my life." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But those 10 years? Those were 10 years I survived. And every day of survival made me stronger, made me more certain that my voice mattered." She handed a signed book to a young black woman who was crying, and I watched my sister offer comfort with a strength that took my breath away. "Every line I drew was a day. I didn't give up," Shanice continued. "Every sketch was proof that my spirit couldn't be broken. That woman tried to steal my art, my voice, my very existence, but she couldn't take my soul." The book launch event that evening was held at the Auburn Avenue Research Library, packed with supporters, survivors, and people whose lives had been touched by her story. As I watched Shanice speak confidently to the crowd, I marveled at her transformation. "Art kept my soul alive when my body was imprisoned," she told the audience. "It was my voice when I couldn't speak, my freedom when I was trapped, my hope when everything seemed hopeless. And now it's my weapon, my way of fighting back against everyone who tried to silence women like us." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Women of all ages stood, some crying, some raising their fists, all recognizing a sister who'd survived the unthinkable. Later, as we walked through downtown Atlanta under the stars, Shanice linked her arm through mine. "You know what the best part is?" she said. "What's that?" "For the first time in 10 years, I'm not just surviving. I'm living. I'm thriving. I'm using my voice to lift up other women who've been silenced." She smiled, and it was genuine, full of hope. That woman thought she could use me, control me, profit from my talent while keeping me caged. But look at me now. I'm free. I'm successful on my own terms. And I'm helping other women break their own chains. I squeezed her hand, my throat tight with emotion. "Shanice, I need to say something." She looked at me, waiting. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I married someone who could do this to you. I'm sorry I was so blind to—" "Marcus, stop." She turned to face me fully, her eyes serious. "You were a victim, too. She manipulated you, lied to you, used you as cover for her crimes. You didn't know. And when you found out, you did the right thing immediately. But I should have. Should have what? Read her mind? Known she was capable of something so evil?" Shanice shook her head. "No, You did what you could with what you knew. And you believed me when it mattered most. You believed the black woman who'd been silenced for a decade. That matters. We walked in silence for a moment, passing restaurants and shops in the heart of our city. What about you? She asked finally. How are you doing with all of this? I thought about the question carefully. The divorce had been swift. Vanessa's confession made it easy for my lawyer. The house had been sold. I couldn't live there anymore, not with those memories. I'd moved into a smaller place in Midtown, started therapy myself. I'm learning to trust again, I said honestly. Learning to see the red flags I missed, learning to listen to my instincts. Learning that love shouldn't require you to ignore your gut. Good, Shanice said firmly. Because you deserve better. You deserve someone who sees you as a partner, not a tool. Someone who lifts up the people you love instead of destroying them. We reached her car, and she hugged me tight. Thank you for believing me, she whispered. Thank you for breaking down that door. Always, I whispered back. Always. As I watched her drive away, heading to her new apartment in East Atlanta Place, with huge windows and natural light. A place she'd chosen herself, felt something shift inside me. This story had taught me that evil can hide behind the most loving facade. That the people we trust most can harbor terrible secrets. For 10 years, I shared a bed with a woman who had my own sister locked away just above our heads. But this story also taught me something more important. The resilience of the human spirit. Particularly the strength of black women who survive against impossible odds. Shanice didn't just survive. She transformed her pain into purpose, her suffering into strength. Truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep it's buried. And sometimes, when we have the courage to speak it, that truth becomes a beacon of hope for others lost in their own darkness. Looking back on this nightmare, I realized the signs were there all along. Kenya's panic call, the strange noises, the artwork that looked far too familiar, Mrs. Patterson noticing that attic light for years. The signs were there, but I let myself be talked out of the truth. Here's what I learned, what I hope you'll take from this story. Never ignore your instincts when something feels off. That quiet voice inside you exists to protect you. You're not overreacting. You're not imagining things. If something feels wrong, investigate. Ask questions. Don't let anyone convince you to doubt your own reality. And if you're hurting in silence right now, if you're trapped in a situation that feels impossible to escape, I hope you find the strength to tell someone you trust. Shame grows in the dark, but healing begins in the light. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. Your voice matters. To the women watching this, especially my black sisters who've been silenced, dismissed, or told your pain doesn't matter. It does. Your survival matters. Your story matters. Your strength matters. If you've already walked through something terrible and survived, remember how strong you truly are. What happened to you does not define your worth. Your story isn't over. There is still light ahead, even if you can't see it yet. Shanice now travels the country, speaking at universities and conferences, teaching art therapy workshops, and most importantly, helping other women find their voices. Her memoir has sold over 100,000 copies. Her artwork hangs in galleries from Atlanta to New York. But more than the success, more than the recognition, she has her freedom. She has her voice. She has her life. And Vanessa? She's serving 25 years in federal prison for kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy, and fraud. The courts showed her no mercy because she showed none to her victim. Justice was served. But more importantly, a survivor reclaimed her power. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever uncovered a painful truth about someone you trusted completely? Have you survived something you thought would break you? Your story matters. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Today, remember, the strongest people aren't those who never fall. They're the ones who rise again, who use their pain to light the way for others, who refuse to let darkness have the final word. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never stop believing in your own truth.